She was found on a Sunday, burned, broken, alone. It was November 29th, 1970, just outside the Norwegian city of Bergen, in a steep, remote valley known to locals as Death Valley. A father and his 2 daughters were hiking when they saw her. At first, they thought it was a mannequin. Something about the way she lay, arms curled in front of her chest, legs stiff, one bent slightly outward. But it wasn't plastic. It was flesh, burned beyond recognition. The stench of scorched hair and chemicals hung in the air. The police arrived quickly, but answers didn't. She had no ID. Her fingerprints had been sanded off. Her face was charred beyond recognition. And from the very first moment, this woman, this anonymous, unclaimed body in the snow, became a mystery that would haunt Norway for decades. They called her the Isdal Woman, because even now, over 50 years later, no one knows who she was. Her cause of death, officially suicide, a lethal mix of sleeping pills and carbon monoxide. But the deeper you dig, the harder that is to believe, because nothing about this case feels accidental. Nothing feels random, and every new piece of information only makes the whole story more impassable. She had traveled under multiple names, at least 8 false identities in total. In one hotel, she was Miss Finella Lork. In another, she was Miss Claudia Tilt. Each time she changed her name, her accent, even her appearance. Blonde one week, brunette the next. Stylish, well-dressed. Distant. She paid in cash. She spoke several languages fluently. German, French, Dutch, possibly more. Her handwriting varied. Her stories never quite matched. Sometimes she was an antiques dealer. Sometimes she worked in fashion. Other times she claimed to be Belgian, or French, or from South America. But always she traveled alone. And always she stayed just long enough to be remembered, without being known. When police searched her suitcases, found abandoned at the Bergen train station, they didn't find a passport, or a driver's license, or any family photos. Instead, they found wigs, disguises, prescription glasses with no lenses, coded notes that looked like gibberish, but later matched her travel movements almost perfectly, and a tube of eczema cream, the only item with a traceable label. It led to a pharmacy in a small Norwegian town. But when officers followed up, the shopkeeper remembered her. He said she was strange, stylish, cold, foreign, just like everyone else. Had said, no one knew her name, but they remembered her presence, always composed, always alert, like someone expecting to be watched. Norway, 1970, wasn't just scenic fjords and quiet villages. It was a Cold War chessboard, an important one. NATO bases were scattered across the country. Allied ships passed through the fjords regularly. Military testing was underway in the far north. Intelligence agents crossed borders unnoticed. And so, the question arose. Was the Isdal Woman a spy? The signs were there. The aliases. The disguises. The silent, solitary movements. The codes. The sudden disappearance. And perhaps most chillingly, the calculated erasure of her own identity. She had removed labels from every item of clothing, burned identifying marks off her belongings, filed the tips of her fingers until they were smooth. No prints, no names, no country. It wasn't just secrecy. It was obliteration. And then there was the way she died. Carbon monoxide, poisoning from a small campfire near her body. A massive overdose of sleeping pills. The sleeping pills were scattered around her, partially dissolved. Her belongings were arranged neatly, jewelry laid beside her, not worn. A fur hat. A bottle of liqueur. 2 plastic bottles that had once contained gasoline. All placed, not dropped. Like someone setting a scene. The fire had been controlled, enough to kill but not to destroy everything. And around her lay burn marks consistent with a staged or assisted fire. There were bruises on her neck. One of her teeth had been knocked loose. Was it suicide? Maybe. But who burns themselves to death after taking 20 sleeping pills? Who takes the time to arrange their belongings while dying? Who carries gasoline into the forest just to disappear? The police said she took her own life, that she had no enemies, that no foul play could be proven. But the public didn't buy it, and neither did the officers who worked the case. Years later, one detective admitted that the investigation had been rushed. That pressure came from higher up to shut it down. That some government agencies were involved, but never left a paper trail. Even stranger, official reports went missing. Evidence was quietly filed away and forgotten. Witness testimonies weren't followed up. And some people, years later, said they'd been discouraged from talking to the press. So what really happened? That depends on who you ask. Some believe she was a KGB agent, monitoring NATO movements. Killed when her cover was blown. Others say she worked for Mossad, Israel's secret intelligence service. That she knew too much. Others think she may have been a courier, moving information, weapons, or chemicals between operatives in Europe. But there's another theory, quieter and more tragic. That she was alone. Truly alone. Not a spy, not a criminal. Just a woman slipping between identities to outrun something no one else could see. That she came to Norway not to complete a mission, but to disappear forever. Maybe their aliases were a form of control. Maybe the codes were just a travel diary for no one but herself. Maybe the lies were her way of surviving. Until they weren't. In 2016, Norway's public broadcaster reopened the case. They tracked down witnesses, re-examined evidence, and used modern science to dig deeper. They conducted isotope analysis on her teeth, a method that can reveal where someone grew up based on water and soil composition, absorbed in childhood. The result: southern or central Germany, possibly the Franco-German border. That was the closest anyone had ever come to placing her on a map. But even then, still no name. No missing persons report. No relatives. Just another faint thread, fraying at their edges. One man came forward. A former military officer. He remembered her. He said he saw her on a train in Norway. She was arguing with another man, in German. The tone was tense. Urgent. He remembered thinking she seemed scared. Or angry. The next day, she was gone. She had checked out of her hotel. 5 days later, her body was found. That was the last time anyone could place her anywhere. Her burial was quiet. A small ceremony. She was laid to rest in Bergen, under a plain grey stone. No name. Just the date of her death and a number. The priest who performed the service didn't know who she was. No one from her life came to mourn her. Her grave receives flowers to this day, left by strangers. Some are curious. Some are haunted. Some just feel like someone should remember her. Because the Isdal woman was not a ghost. She was a person. Someone's daughter. Someone's friend. Maybe someone's enemy. But definitely someone. And yet, after 5 decades, dozens of theories, hundreds of interviews, and one of the most puzzling investigations in Norwegian history, her true identity remains unknown. Not one confirmed name. Not one confirmed origin. Only a story with too many versions, and a woman who seemed to live behind a veil no one could lift. Who was she? Why was she in Norway? Who, if anyone, wanted her dead? Was she hiding from the world? Or working for it? No matter how many times you turn the puzzle, the pieces never quite fit. Every clue is a riddle. Every answer, a deeper question. She's become part of the mythology now, a Cold War ghost story, wrapped in fire and silence. But maybe that's exactly what she wanted. To disappear. Completely. Cleanly. No ties. No trail. Just ash in a valley the locals once called Death Valley, long before she ever arrived. The Isdal woman didn't just die nameless. She lived that way. Perfectly erased. Perfectly hidden. And maybe, just maybe, that was the real plan all along.